The water churns red beneath the stadium lights. A young woman thrashes, fighting for her life. But she isn't alone. 3 shadows circle her, thousands of pounds of raw muscle and power. Their black dorsal fins cut through the surface like blades. The crowd is screaming. Children cover their eyes. Trainers rush to the rail, but it's already too late. One of the whales lunges upward, seizing her ankle, dragging her under. Seconds later, she surfaces again, gasping for air, only to be shoved down by another. This isn't a performance. It's the first time in history an orca has killed a human being. Her name was Keltie Byrne. She was only 20 years old. A swimmer, a dreamer, a life full of promise, gone in a matter of minutes. On this night, at a little-known marine park in British Columbia, the world's understanding of killer whales would change forever. And it all began with one slip of the foot, and 3 captive predators waiting for an opportunity. Before the screams and sirens, she was velocity and light. Keltie Byrne, 20, lived in the water the way others live in air. Strong shoulders, clean strokes, a body tuned by years of competitive swimming. Friends remember the grin that arrived first, the hair still damp from practice, the way she chased hard things because they felt worth doing. Sealand hired her young. Entry-level title, outsized responsibility. She fed, observed, learned the language of flukes and fins, memorized the tiny changes that mean everything around apex predators. She was not careless. She was ambitious in the way of people who believe their future has already started. Her world narrowed to early mornings and salt on her hands, to the hum of pumps and the black and white shapes that surfaced like ghosts and watched her with coin-dark eyes. She wrote goals on scrap paper. She stayed late. She wanted more access, more trust, more time near the animals that had owned her imagination since childhood. Keltie wasn't a daredevil. She was disciplined. She did the work. She believed in it. And that belief, bright, steady, unguarded, would meet a truth no training could blunt. Intelligence doesn't tame instinct, and proximity to power is always borrowed time. Sealand's 3 stars were not circus props. They were apex predators forced into a bathtub. There was Tilikum, the largest male orca in captivity at the time, 22 feet long, weighing over 11,000 pounds. Beside him, 2 adult females, Haida 2 and Nootka 4. In the wild, orcas roam 100 miles in a single day, hunting, socializing, weaving through the vastness of the ocean. Here, in Victoria, British Columbia, they circled endlessly in a concrete pool just 100 feet across. Frustration lived in that water. Former staff recalled the slapping tails, the gnawing at metal bars, the silence between shows when the whales hovered like shadows, watching. Their teeth wore down on steel gates. Their bodies bore rake marks from constant aggression. There was no escape, not from each other, not from boredom. Sealand called them performers. But captivity reshaped them into something unpredictable. They learned control through dominance. If one wanted space, the other suffered. If one refused to move, the pool became a battlefield. Trainers spoke of close calls, slips, brushes of power that could have ended careers in a second. And into this uneasy kingdom, Keltie Byrne walked daily, trusting that routine and discipline could hold back nature itself. She believed she knew them. She believed the walls were enough. But the whales had already been waiting, for a moment, an opening, to remind everyone who truly ruled the water. February 20th, 1991, began like any other winter morning at Sealand of the Pacific. The air outside was crisp, the waters of Victoria Harbor steel gray under a low sky. Inside the marine park, trainers readied the orcas for yet another round of performances. For the public, it was spectacle. Giant whales leaping from the water on cue, showering the crowd with icy spray. For the staff, it was routine, even monotonous. That day, 20-year-old Keltie Byrne moved with her usual calm efficiency. A competitive swimmer, she was athletic, strong, and deeply respected by her peers. Though still young, she was seen as reliable, someone who could handle the unpredictable rhythm of working alongside massive predators. Visitors filed in, taking seats around the small pool. Children pressed sticky fingers against the glass. Parents juggled cameras. The show was about to begin, and the whales, Tilikum, Haida 2, and Nootka 4, rose to the surface. Slick black and white bodies cutting through the water like torpedoes. No one in the stands knew it then, but the tension in the pool had been building for weeks. The orcas were restless, more aggressive than usual. Their trainers whispered about incidents behind closed doors. And on this day, when Keltie slipped into position, all the ingredients for disaster were already in place. The show would go on. The crowd would laugh and cheer. But when it was over, nothing at Sealand would ever be the same again. The performance unfolded like so many before it. Music blared over tinny speakers, trainers barked cues, and the whales obeyed, leaping high, twisting in midair, crashing down in a thunder of spray. The crowd erupted in delight. Keltie Byrne moved along the narrow platform that circled the pool, keeping pace with the orcas as they performed. She was focused, precise, doing what she had done countless times before. But in the chaos of the moment, as one whale surged past, her footing slipped. Witnesses recall the sickening sound of her body hitting the water. A splash, sharp gasps from the audience, and then silence. An instant of stillness before anyone truly understood what had happened. For Keltie, the fall was disorienting. She was a strong swimmer, but this was no ordinary pool. The water churned with 10,000 pounds of muscle and teeth circling around her. She surfaced once, treading frantically, calling out for help. Trainers rushed to the edge, throwing flotation devices. But in the shadows below, the orcas had noticed. Their movements changed, no longer playful, no longer rehearsed. The audience thought it was still part of the act. It wasn't. Within seconds, the show had ended, and the nightmare had begun. The water rippled unnaturally as one of the orcas broke formation. It wasn't waiting for a cue. Witnesses would later describe the moment with chilling clarity. Keltie was only meters from the pool's edge, her arms outstretched, reaching for the life ring tossed toward her. Then, suddenly, an orca surged from below and clamped onto her leg. The impact yanked her under so violently that gasps erupted from the stands. Some thought it was still part of the performance, but the screams from her fellow trainers shattered that illusion. Keltie fought her way back to the surface, coughing, thrashing, desperate to stay afloat. Trainers shouted, banging on the sides of the tank, trying to distract the whales. But the orca returned, slamming into her, dragging her beneath the surface again. Every time she broke through for air, she cried out, her voice edged with panic. She was no longer a trainer in control of her animals. She was prey, cornered in their world. From the stands, children clutched their parents, confused. The laughter that had filled the air only minutes earlier had dissolved into horror. The first strike was not the last. It was only the beginning. Keltie burst to the surface, gasping, her arms flailing toward the life ring just out of reach. But she never got the chance to grab it. A second orca closed in, jaws snapping around her other leg. The sheer force spun her body, dragging her sideways through the water. The crowd screamed. Trainers on deck hurled poles, ropes, anything that might distract the whales. But the orcas weren't letting go. They worked together, circling, diving, striking. This wasn't random aggression. It looked like coordination. Each time Keltie clawed her way toward the surface, one whale would block her ascent, while another surged from below to drag her back under. Her head broke the surface only long enough to cry, "Help me!" before another pull silenced her. Her colleagues leaned over the rail, their knuckles white as they reached, desperate to grab her hand. But each attempt was cut short as the whales yanked her away like a rag doll. The water turned violent, splashes, foam, and glimpses of Keltie's terrified face vanishing again and again. What had begun as a single strike had now turned into a calculated, relentless hunt, and the orcas were winning. For almost 10 minutes, Keltie fought with every ounce of strength she had left. Her survival instinct was brutal, desperate, kicking, clawing, gasping. But the whales were merciless. Each time she surfaced, the crowd heard her screams weaken, her words cut short as another surge of water pulled her under. Trainers shouted commands they knew the whales wouldn't obey. They pounded the water with poles, begging the animals to release her. Nothing worked. One orca clamped down on her hip, another gripped her leg, and together they twisted her body in opposite directions. The sound of the crowd's horror mixed with the splash of black and white bodies, thrashing water, and the faintest cry from Keltie as she vanished again. Then came the silence, the kind that follows when strength is gone. Her arms no longer reached. Her cries no longer broke the surface. Instead, her body went limp, dragged deep beneath the tank by the three predators that refused to release her. The audience stood frozen in shock. Trainers stared into the churning blue, praying for her to resurface. But she never did. The whales had claimed their victim, and the pool went still. The horror did not end with Keltie's final breath. The whales, Haida, Nootka, and the young male Tilikum, did not let her go. For hours, they circled the pool with her body clamped in their jaws, surfacing occasionally as if in triumph. Every attempt to recover her was met with defiance. Staff members stood helpless on the concrete edge, radios buzzing, their voices breaking with panic. Divers could not enter the tank. It was suicide. The only hope was for the orcas to grow tired. But they didn't. Instead, they paraded Keltie's lifeless form like a trophy, as if showing the crowd their power. Spectators who had witnessed the attack remained behind the barriers, some sobbing, others too shocked to move. Parents shielded children's eyes, though it was far too late to erase what they had seen. It wasn't until hours later, when the whales finally released her, that staff could recover Keltie's body. By then, the truth was undeniable. She had drowned, her injuries compounded by the sheer force of the orca's attacks. The pool was silent again, but the damage was permanent. Sealand of the Pacific would never recover from the nightmare it had unleashed. News of Keltie Byrne's death spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed of the young trainer dragged to her death by killer whales. For the public, it was unthinkable. A tragedy staged not in the open ocean, but inside a tourist attraction, in a controlled environment where nothing like this was supposed to happen. Sealand's management scrambled for damage control, but the images were burned into the community's memory. A vibrant 20-year-old, gone in front of witnesses. Parents who once brought their children to see the whales now recoiled in fear. Questions raged. How could this happen? Why wasn't she safe? Behind closed doors, trainers admitted what they had long feared. The whales, especially Tilikum, had grown restless in their cramped enclosure. Aggression was dismissed as play, but Keltie's death proved it was anything but. Protesters began gathering outside the park gates, holding signs that demanded the whale's release and the park's closure. Animal welfare groups seized the moment, pointing to the attack as evidence of captivity's brutality. The illusion shattered. Sealand was no longer seen as a family-friendly attraction. It was now the scene of a preventable tragedy, a place where entertainment had come at the ultimate cost. The attack didn't just end Keltie Byrne's life, it sealed the fate of Sealand of the Pacific. Within weeks, attendance plummeted. Parents pulled their children from whale shows. Reporters dug into the park's history, exposing troubling details. The whale's confinement in a tiny metal tank, the repeated warnings ignored, the uneasy trainers who had voiced concerns but were brushed aside. Public opinion turned fast. What once felt like awe now seemed grotesque. 3 apex predators crammed into a glorified swimming pool, performing tricks for fish. Keltie's death had ripped away the curtain, and people didn't like what they saw. Sealand tried to reassure the public, promising safety measures, but the words rang hollow. Nobody could forget the sight of those whales dragging a human under, again and again, while helpless staff and guests looked on. The park's reputation crumbled beyond repair. By the end of 1991, Sealand announced it was shutting its doors for good. The whales, Tilikum, Haida II, and Nootka 44, would be shipped to other marine parks. For Sealand, the dream was over. For the whales, the nightmare was only beginning. When Sealand closed, the orcas were shipped off. Tilikum, the largest male, was sent to SeaWorld Orlando. To the public, it looked like a new beginning. But for those who knew his history, it was a ticking time bomb. Tilikum had been one of the whales that killed Keltie Byrne. He had learned that he could dominate humans, and that once a trainer was in the water, there was no escape. Yet instead of being retired or placed in sanctuary, he was folded into SeaWorld's breeding program. Over half of the orcas in SeaWorld's collection would eventually carry his bloodline, but his violent past was never erased. Nearly 2 decades later, in 2010, Tilikum struck again, dragging trainer Dawn Brancheau to her death in front of hundreds of horrified visitors. It was the most infamous orca attack ever recorded. Keltie Byrne's death had been the first warning. It should have changed everything. Instead, it was buried, literally and figuratively, beneath the surface of the tank. And because of that silence, more lives would be lost. Her final moments live on as a chilling reminder. When humans confine nature's most powerful predators, the cage doesn't just hold the animal. It traps us all. Keltie Byrne wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. She was a young woman doing her job, trying to find her place in the world. But one slip into a tank of captive giants ended her life and exposed a truth we still struggle to face. Orcas are not stage props. They are apex predators, built for the open ocean, not concrete prisons. Keltie's drowning was the first fatal orca attack on record. It should have been the last. Instead, it was ignored, minimized, brushed away as a tragedy without consequence. And because of that silence, the cycle repeated.